Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Would you work for food? They offered the homeless man at the emergency station. Everyone thought they had hired an ordinary helper, but as soon as they went out on a call, the colleagues grew wary. And a week later, something happened that left everyone stunned. Dear friends, before we continue, please check if you are subscribed to our channel. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts about our story in the comments. Enjoy listening. The March evening drummed rain against the windows of the city clinic. Antonio Solano took off his white coat and carefully hung it in his locker, a smooth, habitual motion after 8 years of working as a doctor. The hallways were empty, only the duty nurse clicked on the computer keys, finishing the day's records. "Dr. Antonio, are you staying late again?" Nina Pedro's voice carried a hint of reproach. "The workday ended long ago. I need to visit Senora Maria. Her blood pressure's been unstable, and she lives alone," he said, pulling on his jacket, his ears slightly flushed with concern for his patient. "You know that general practitioners don't get extra pay for house calls, right?" The nurse shook her head. "The younger doctors have long since gone home." Antonio gave a tired smile. Even he couldn't always explain what compelled him to linger by a patient's bedside longer than necessary, take extra shifts, or visit lonely elderly patients after hours. It was as if some force inside him wouldn't let him rest until he made sure the person was all right. Outside, a spring downpour was raging. Antonio turned up his collar and headed toward his old sedan. The rain reminded him of another evening, 9 years ago, when his world suddenly turned upside down and never returned to how it once was. December 2008, the village of Joinville, Tilius Province. Rain poured in large drops, cloaking the adobe houses and leaning fences. The Solano house stood on the edge of the village, a solid 1960s structure with wooden shutters and a wide veranda. A thin wisp of smoke rose from the chimney, and the warm glow of a kerosene lamp flickered in the windows. "Dona Patricia, why are you taking it so hard?" "Matilda," the neighbor's voice came from the hallway. "It's God's will, they're closing the medical station." "I've worked here for 43 years, Matilda." 43, Patricia Tomaso wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron. "Since 65, not a single day missed." "And what are people supposed to do now?" "The administrative center's 40 kilometers away, and the bus runs once a week." The 73-year-old woman sat on a bench by the fireplace, clutching a worn medical bag in her hands. Her hair, neatly pinned into a tight bun, had long since turned gray, but her eyes remained lively and sharp, eyes that could see straight through a person. "Mama, don't torment yourself like this." Rosaria Miguel, the Felcher's daughter, set a teapot on the table. "Maybe it's really time to retire? You're already 73. And what about the people?" Patricia got up and paced the room. "Yesterday Senora Estefania came, her grandson has a sore throat. And the day before, old Don Macario rushed in, his wife struggling with high blood pressure. Where are they supposed to go now?" "They say the Felcher station will stay open in Abadals," Rosaria said carefully. "Abadals," the old woman snorted. 20 kilometers on a broken-down road. By the time you get there, you die along the way." Rosaria was pouring tea into glass cups. At 43, she looked younger than her age, slim, with intelligent eyes behind thin-framed glasses. For 20 years she had run the village library, organized clubs for children, staged plays with them. But in recent years, the number of readers had dwindled as young people left for the cities. "Do you remember, Mama, how you delivered Dona Axelia's baby during the war?" Rosaria tried to distract her mother from her heavy thoughts. "Her son is now a professor in the capital." I remember, Patricia smiled. "She suffered all night. Poor thing. The rain was pouring like from a bucket, there was no way to reach the administrative center. And in the morning, Carlitos was born, healthy and loud. And look at him now, a real scholar. And Pedrito Saiz still remembers how you nursed him through pneumonia. How could he forget? I visited him for 2 weeks, giving him injections. His parents had almost given up hope. And now he's a mechanic, supporting his family. The women fell silent. The fire crackled in the fireplace, and the winter wind howled outside the window. "Mama, do you remember your guava jam?" Rosaria asked softly. "With lemon zest? Antonito loved it so much as a child." "How could I forget?" The old woman's eyes lit up. "The recipe was passed down from my mother. She used to say, 'Patricia, jam isn't just a sweet treat. It's love sealed in jars. When your grandson comes in the winter, you must always have some ready.'" Rosaria took a photo from the shelf, a young man in a white coat, holding a red diploma. "His thesis defense is coming up soon. He's going to be a doctor, just like you dreamed." God willing, Patricia crossed herself. 21 years old already, and it feels like just yesterday I was swaddling him. I only hope he doesn't forget where his roots are. Life in the city can be tempting. Young people get dazzled and forget about simple folk. Antonito won't forget. He remembers how you cared for him when he was sick, how you told him stories about Dr. Sorcerers. "Ah, Rosarita," her mother sighed. "It's good your late husband didn't live to see this day. He would have worried so much. I remember how he used to say, 'Medicine is a sacred calling. Those who heal people serve God.'" The evening dragged on slowly. The women sifted through memories like prayer beads, each one precious, each one painful to let go. Outside, the rain kept pouring, flooding the paths and muffling the sounds. "Well, it's time to close up the fireplace," Patricia said, getting up. "I'm so tired today. Last day at work, all those tears." "Mama, let me put the damper on," Rosaria offered. "Nonsense, I'm used to doing it myself. 40 years tending the fire, I can manage." Rosaria yawned. "Then I'll head to bed. Tomorrow we have inventory at the library. Don't stay up too late. I'll just tidy up a bit and close the damper." But fatigue and distress took their toll. Patricia, mechanically closing the fireplace damper, didn't notice that the embers hadn't completely burned out. Carbon monoxide began to seep into the rooms. On the morning of December 23rd, Antonio arrived for the holidays, a fifth-year medical student, a tall young man with kind eyes and strong hands. The bus had been delayed, so he had to hitch a ride. The driver, a local man named Don Pedro, chatted with him the whole way. "Well, Antonio, you'll be a doctor soon, right? We sure need doctors around here." "Very soon, Uncle Pedro. I'll defend my thesis in the spring. Will you come back to us, or stay in the city?" "I don't know yet. First, I have to work where they assign me." It would be good if you came back. Dona Patricia is retiring, they're closing the clinic. And there are still so many people here." The house greeted him with an unusual silence. Normally, by 6 in the morning, his grandmother would already be bustling in the kitchen, and his mother would be tidying up library records. Antonio pulled the front door. It wasn't locked. "Grandma." "Mom," he called as he stepped into the main room. Silence. A sense of dread rose inside him. Antonio walked into the room and stopped dead. His grandmother sat on the bench by the fireplace, her head tilted back against the rest. Nearby, his mother lay on the floor. "Grandma." Antonio rushed to her and checked her pulse. Nothing. Rosaria also showed no signs of life. As a medical student, he understood immediately: carbon monoxide poisoning. There was a faint smell of smoke in the room, and the damper was closed. The next few hours passed in a blur, calling the ambulance, the arrival of the local police officer, the filing of reports. Neighbors gathered, wailing and offering comfort, but Antonio stood motionless in the middle of the now empty house, unable to believe that he would never again hear his grandmother's voice or hug his mother. January 2009. They buried mother and daughter on the same day, side by side, in the village cemetery. Half the village came to bid farewell to Patricia Tomasa. Over 40 years of work as a feldsher, she had helped bring a good 100 local children into the world and nursed hundreds more back to health. May she rest in peace, old Anfisa crossed herself. She got so many people back on their feet. Remember how she saved little Miguelito Verono from diphtheria? Old Don Macario wiped his eyes. The doctors had given up, but she stayed by his bedside for 3 days without leaving. And Rosarito was a good one too, sobbed Zenaida Semyonova, the former librarian. She taught so many children to love books, put on plays with them. Antonio stood by the fresh graves, feeling a cold emptiness growing inside him. He was alone now. He would have to sell the house, there was no work in the village, and he still needed to finish university. In the evening, after everyone had left, he remained in the house alone with his memories. He sorted through his grandmother's belongings and came across her old medical bag. Worn leather, a brass clasp, inside, a 1965 stethoscope, a set of instruments, vials of medicine, and a thick notebook. He opened the notebook. Neatly written entries listed patients' addresses, dates of visits, diagnoses. Some notes dated back to the 1970s. On the first page, written in ink, Patricia Solano. He who heals the body, heals the soul. Antonio pressed the bag to his chest and, for the first time in days, cried. Bitterly, uncontrollably, the way only men cry when they can no longer hold it in. And the next morning, standing by the graves, he made a vow. Grandma, Mom, I won't let you down. I will heal people, just as you taught me. Not for money, not for fame, but so that your work will live on. Spring 2009. Provincial Administrative Center. Antonio defended his thesis with honors. A red diploma opened the way to postgraduate studies at prestigious clinics. But the young doctor chose a different path. He went to serve in the village of Abidos, where a general practitioner was badly needed. 3 years at the rural hospital taught him more than all the university lectures combined. The lack of medicine forced him to find creative solutions. Worn-out equipment made him rely on experience and intuition. And most importantly, he learned what it truly meant to be needed by people. The elderly came to him not only for treatment but to talk. Young mothers entrusted him with their most precious treasure, their children. Farmers called him when their animals were sick and no vet was available. Doctor, have you thought about moving to the city? Asked the district nurse, Valentina. A young specialist with a red diploma, you'd have a great career in the provincial hospital. I'm thinking about it, Antonio answered honestly. I need to gain experience first, then we'll see. And in 2012, he transferred to the city hospital. Those 3 years in the Abidos Rural Hospital had taught him more than all the lectures at university. It was there he also met Ines Kraus, a beautiful resident with ambitious plans. But his grandmother's medical bag always stayed at home, on his desk. Inside was a photograph of Patricia Tomasa in a white coat in front of the rural clinic. And every time Antonio had to make a decision, it was as if he was consulting her. March 2017. Back to the present. The rain drummed on the car roof as Antonio drove to visit an elderly patient. Senora Maria met him at the gate. Oh, doctor, I thought you wouldn't come in such weather. I promised, Senora Maria. How are you feeling? My blood pressure's acting up, I feel dizzy. But come in, no sense standing in the rain. The small apartment smelled of medicine and loneliness. Antonio measured her blood pressure, it was high, adjusted her treatment, and gave her a referral for tests. Thank you, Dr. Antonio. Not every doctor makes house calls for an old lady. Oh, come now, Senora Maria. It's my job. Job, the old woman shook her head. Back in my village, we had a felcher too, her name was Patricia. She used to say it was her job. But she would visit the sick at night, in any weather. There aren't many people like that left. Antonio froze. His ears turned red from emotion. What was her last name? Solano. Patricia Tomasa Solano. God rest her soul, she was a good woman. Antonio froze. Inside, something cracked, like thin ice under the first steps of spring. It can't be. Her grandson, then? Oh, Lord. I was wondering why you were so caring. Must be those good old genes. She nursed me through pneumonia back in '59 when I was just a young woman. They talked for a long time about his grandmother, about the old days, and what it meant to be a doctor. And when Antonio was leaving, the old woman said, "Take care of yourself, grandson. Doctors like you and your grandma are rare as gold. People need you." On the way home, Antonio reflected on how strangely human destinies intertwine. 9 years had passed since the tragedy, yet his grandmother's wisdom still guided his steps. Every time he wanted to give up, to let his hands fall, he would hear her words, "He who heals the body, heals the soul." Maybe it was time for a change. Maybe the city wasn't his path after all. These thoughts stayed with him for a long time. September 2012. Provincial Hospital. The city hospital wrapped Antonio in a businesslike atmosphere. Everything here was different from the familiar rural clinic. The white tile corridors were blinding, the equipment lights blinked in the procedure rooms, and young doctors discussed career prospects. "Solano, you're assigned to the 3rd Therapeutic Department," the HR manager said, barely glancing at his papers. "Head of Department Don Borge is waiting for you." Borge Simon Krust turned out to be a middle-aged man with a shiny face and a sharp gaze. His handshake was dampened far too long. "Well, young specialist, are you ready for real work?" The smile didn't reach Don Borge's eyes. In the village, it must have been simple: headache, aspirin, fever, acetaminophen. Antonio answered calmly. "There were all kinds of cases, Don Borge. Here it's a different system. You need to use your head, have connections, see the bigger picture. Understand?" Antonio didn't grasp the meaning of those words at the time. He only understood 6 months later. He noticed Ines Kraus on his very first day, a slender brunette in a perfectly white lab coat, explaining something to a group of medical interns. She spoke clearly and professionally, but her voice had a metallic note, as if every word had been calculated in advance. "Beautiful, isn't she?" a young resident, Sergio, winked. "But way too cold. Many have tried to approach her, no luck." Antonio said nothing. For some reason, he thought of his mother, always composed, always knowing what to say. But his mother's eyes had warmth. This girl's eyes. Their first meeting happened by chance. Antonio was staying late after his shift, going over the medical history of a difficult patient, when Ines walked into the staff room. "Still working?" she said, surprised. "Your shift ended long ago. I'm worried about Grandpa Ivan. His symptoms don't match the diagnosis." Ines came closer and glanced at the chart. She smelled of expensive French perfume, not like the village women, of honey and fresh bread. "Interesting," she said slowly. "Young doctors usually can't wait to get home. And you? What about me? Am I different?" There was a hint of genuine interest in her voice. Winter 2013. Their relationship developed slowly, like a dance where every step was measured and deliberate. Ines accepted signs of attention cautiously, as if calculating their worth. Antonio, however, fell for her honestly and wholeheartedly, the way men from the countryside do, men who don't throw the word love around lightly. The first crack in her wall of aloofness appeared when Antonio offered to cover her shift. Ines had caught a cold, her temperature climbed to 38 degrees Celsius, but she couldn't get out of her shift. "Are you serious?" she asked, surprised. "You must have plans for the evening." "Plans can wait. The patients need a doctor, not a feverish zombie." "Zombie?" For the first time in months of knowing her, she laughed sincerely. "Thank you. I'm not used to people helping me for nothing." "And what are you used to?" "Quid pro quo. You do something for me, I do something for you. Always something in return." Antonio looked at her closely. Beneath the perfect makeup and impeccable hairstyle, he saw something weary and guarded. "Not always," he said quietly. In Ines's apartment, everything was beautiful but cold: designer furniture, paintings in expensive frames, not a single unnecessary item. Antonio was fixing a temperamental kitchen faucet while she lay with a thermometer. "Where did a doctor get hands like that?" she asked, watching him handle the tools with ease. "My grandfather taught me. He used to say, a man should know how to heal a soul and fix a faucet." "Romantic," she said with a hint of irony, but her gaze softened. Spring 2013. "I have something special," Antonio said, taking out a glass jar filled with golden contents. "What is it?" "Jam. Guava with lemon zest. My grandmother's recipe." Ines tasted it carefully with a spoon. Her eyes widened in surprise. "This is incredible. Where did you get it?" "I made it myself. From my grandmother's notes. She used to say, jam is love sealed in jars." "Love?" Ines repeated, and something trembled in her voice. "Yes. When you make it with soul, for someone you care about." Antonio spoke about his childhood in the village, about his grandmother the Feldscher, about the house with wooden shutters. He spoke simply, without embellishment, but vividly enough that images formed before her eyes: a fireplace with cast iron pots, a barn with kittens, endless fields under an evening sky. Ines listened, occasionally asking questions. But inwardly she thought, naive, funny, but honest. In her world, where every gesture was calculated for advantage, such openness seemed almost impossible. "And you?" Antonio asked. "Tell me about your family." "My father is a cardiac surgeon, my mother is an urologist." "A dynasty," her voice became drier. "I knew from childhood I'd be a doctor. There was no other option." "And did you want to?" "Want?" She was caught off guard. "I don't know. I never thought about it." Summer 2014. They rented a one-room apartment on the outskirts of the city, modest but cozy. Antonio enthusiastically took charge of setting up the place. He hung wallpaper, assembled furniture, put up paintings. Ines watched with a smile that seemed genuine. "Why put in so much effort?" she asked one day. "It's a rental. It's not really ours. A home isn't about the walls. A home is where you feel good with someone." In the evenings, they made plans. Antonio dreamed of a family, children, maybe even returning to the village to open a proper clinic and treat people with real care. Ines nodded and agreed, but her plans were different: a private clinic, wealthy patients, her own practice in the city center. "First, we need to gain experience," she would say. "Build connections. And then we'll see." They planned the wedding for the summer of 2015. Antonio was already looking at rings, modest but beautiful, something a young doctor could afford. Ines didn't object, though she wasn't particularly enthusiastic either. "The main thing is not to rush," she kept repeating. "First, build a career, then start a family." Spring 2015. Something changed quietly, the way the weather changes before a storm. The nurses at the department started giving Antonio strange looks, a mix of pity and curiosity. Conversations would fall silent when he passed by. "Is something going on?" he asked Enrique Flores, his only real friend at the hospital. "No, everything's fine," Enrique replied, avoiding his eyes. But one day, after a staff meeting, Enrique finally decided to talk. "Antonio, you know not everything in medicine is fair, right?" "What do you mean?" "Well, some people use special methods to move up." "Bribes?" "Not just that," Enrique hesitated. "There are professors who, let's say, demand extra lessons from female students. Especially those aiming for top honors." Antonio felt a sinking sensation in his chest. "What's that got to do with anything?" "Nothing. Just be careful." Doubts began gnawing at him like rust on metal. Antonio tried to brush them off, to find excuses. Ines wasn't like that. She was honest, decent. Enrique was just gossiping. But when Enrique's younger sister, Adriana, told him the truth, his world turned upside down. "I studied with her," Adriana said. Ines was always calculating. She only made friends with people who were useful, and the lengths she went to for grades. What are you saying? Private lessons with professors. Individual consultations, Adriana spoke carefully but clearly. Everyone knew, they just kept quiet. No way, Antonio shook his head. She's not like that. Antonio, I don't want to upset you, but be careful. Women like her know how to play a role. June 2015. I'm staying late for the night shift, Ines said at dinner. A colleague got sick and asked me to cover. Want me to drive you? We could spend some time together. No need. I'll be stuck with paperwork, you'll be bored. Something in her tone made him uneasy. Ines avoided his gaze and kept fiddling with her phone. Ines, is everything okay? Of course. Just tired. Don't come by, okay? Get some rest at home. But he couldn't sleep. Antonio tossed and turned, replaying snatches of conversations, hints, the strange looks from colleagues. At 2 a.m., he couldn't stand it anymore. He got dressed and drove to the hospital. The corridors of the therapeutic ward were dim and quiet. The nurse on duty was dozing at her station. Antonio walked to the staff room. The door was locked. Against all rules, the staff room was supposed to stay open. He knocked. Occupied, came Ines's voice. It's me, Antonio. A long pause. Rustling. Whispering. Finally, the door opened slightly, and Ines's flushed face with disheveled hair appeared in the gap. What are you doing here? I came to check on you. You said. Said what? Behind her, sounds, someone moving around, getting dressed. Then Borge Simon Krusp appeared, his shirt unbuttoned, a smug smile on his face. Ah, Solano. Can't sleep either, he grinned shamelessly. Happens, you know. Youth, hormones. Antonio looked at Ines, waiting for an explanation, for an apology, anything human. But she only said coldly, You're not my husband. Don't make a scene. Ines. What? I'm an adult. I have a right to a personal life. Krusp smirked even wider. Don't take it so hard, young man. I have quite the collection, Inesita isn't the first I've mentored. Just don't air the dirty laundry, you understand? That was enough. Antonio turned and walked away. Ines called after him. Antonio, wait. You're misunderstanding everything. He turned back. There was no shame or remorse in her eyes, only irritation that her plans had been ruined. I understand perfectly, he said quietly. Finally. Antonio packed his things in an hour. There wasn't much, he had the village habit of not accumulating unnecessary stuff. He left his share of the rent money and the engagement ring, which he never got to give her, on the table. Ines returned by lunchtime, confident she could smooth things over. But the apartment greeted her with emptiness. Antonio spent the night in the Central Hotel, a cheap room with a sagging bed and peeling wallpaper. In the morning, he called Enrique. You were right, he said into the phone. She used me as a cover so no one would suspect her affair with Krusp. Buddy. I'm sorry. Don't be. Better to know the truth now than after the wedding. What are you going to do? I don't know. I'll have to quit the hospital, I can't face them every day. Hold off. Maybe there are other options. Antonio hung up and pulled out his grandmother's photo. Patricia Tomasa looked at him with her wise, kind village eyes. Grandma, he whispered. What should I do? Where should I go? And it was as if he heard her voice, go where you're needed. Go to the people. The city illusions dissolved like morning mist. Ahead, a new road was waiting. July 2015. Enrique was half an hour late, tied up with the aftermath of a complicated surgery. Antonio sat by the window, stirring his cold coffee and watching passers-by. A week at the hotel had hollowed out his face, shadows hung under his eyes. "Sorry, buddy," Enrique plopped down across from him. Old man with a heart attack barely saved him. "No problem. I'm used to waiting. How are you? You look rough." Antonio gave a crooked smile. How's someone supposed to look after being played for 2 years? Enrique ordered tea and studied his friend's face closely. "You know, I've been meaning to tell you about Ines for a long time. Back at university, there were already stories about her." "What kind of talk?" "Well," Enrique scratched the back of his head awkwardly. "The professors used to gossip among themselves. Said some of the female students were, let's say, a little too diligent. Especially the ones aiming for a red diploma." "And you kept silent?" "What could I have said? I didn't know if it was gossip or the truth. Besides, you were so in love with her. Try explaining something like that to a man in love." Antonio nodded. He understood back then he wouldn't have believed it either. "She used me as a cover," he said quietly, "to keep anyone from suspecting her affair with Crusp. Serious relationship, wedding plans. And all the while. Antonio, it's not your fault. I know. But that doesn't make it any easier." Enrique was silent for a moment, then said firmly, "Listen, I have a suggestion. Do you want to leave the city? Start over?" "Where? Doing what?" "There's a vacancy, not in the city though. In Rosarito, about 100 kilometers from here. It's a working class settlement. They need a chief doctor at the emergency station." Antonio lifted his head. "Chief doctor? Who would take me? I don't have any administrative experience." "Well, they don't really require much experience. They've been without a permanent head for 5 years. People come for 6 months, a year, and leave. Conditions are tough." "How tough?" "Low salary, ancient equipment, small staff. But you'd have full independence. No one breathing down your neck, you can work how you see fit." Antonio thought about it. Childhood memories floated up, the village clinic, his grandmother with her worn bag, the grateful eyes of patients. "And there's one idea," Enrique continued, thoughtfully stirring his tea. "You know, I've observed something for years. People act very differently around bosses than they do around peers. Show them a boss, and they put on masks. But with colleagues, they're real." "Of course. So what if you start out there as an ordinary employee? For a week or two. See how things really are, who's who. Then you reveal who you really are. Why make it complicated? Because there's a lot of turnover there. People are used to new bosses making big promises and running off at the first sign of trouble. If you walk in as chief doctor, they'll just put on a show. This way, you'll see the real situation." The idea seemed sound and tempting, to disappear for a while, become someone else, forget about Ines and her betrayal. "And how would we set that up?" "We'll come up with a cover story. Say your documents were stolen on the bus and you're looking for any kind of work. It's a simple crowd, they'll believe it." August 2015. Provincial Department of Health. Valentina Eduardo Murillo met Antonio in her office, a woman in her 50s with tired but kind eyes. Piles of documents towered on her desk, and the phone rang nonstop. "Well, young man, ready for a challenge?" She put her pen down and looked at Antonio carefully. "But let me warn you right away, no fairy tales here. The station in Rosarito is no resort. Ready to hear the truth?" The truth was, no one lasted there. 5 years without a permanent chief. The equipment was old, the building needed repairs, the salary was dismal. The last chief doctor lasted 8 months before fleeing to a private clinic. And the staff? The staff is gold. Damian Pedro Secamano, a felcher with 30 years of experience. If he had a higher education, he'd have been chief doctor himself by now. Claudia Esteban, the dispatcher, a tough woman. Salvador Ivan, the driver, knows the ambulance better than any engineer. They're the ones keeping the place afloat. Why did the previous chief doctors leave? Valentina Eduardo sighed. Some couldn't handle the low pay, some wanted city comforts. One even said in his first week that the locals didn't respect him. Imagine that, a man came to serve the people but expected a red carpet. And is there housing? There's an apartment provided with the station. 2 rooms, basic amenities. Not a palace, but livable. Though the neighbors are special, always calls, emergencies, hustle and bustle. Not everyone likes that, she said, walking to the window. To be honest, Dr. Antonio, I've almost given up hope of finding someone who would stay there. Maybe you'll last longer. You have rural work experience, that's a big plus. And the station's condition? Terrible. The ambulances are museum pieces. Equipment's worn out by 90%. But if you can find sponsors, a lot could change. The main thing is the will. Valentina Eduardo, what if I first worked there as a regular employee? To get a feel for the place, she raised an eyebrow in surprise. Interesting idea. Usually, new chief doctors jump straight into the big chair and start making changes. You want to see things from the ground up? I want to understand what I'm dealing with. And get to know the people better. Smart. All right, we'll do it that way. Officially, you won't be hired yet. We'll send you as a trainee. Later, when you've figured things out, we'll formalize it properly. Antonio nodded. The plan seemed reasonable. Enrique helped Antonio prepare for the performance with the enthusiasm of a real director. The main thing is not to overdo it, he instructed while Antonio tried on old jeans and a faded jacket. You're not a homeless guy, but you're not some big shot either. Just an ordinary man who fell on hard times. What if they recognize me? They won't. You're not a famous actor. Besides, people see what they expect to see. If you say your documents were stolen, they'll believe it. The cover story was simple. He was traveling for work to a neighboring province, got robbed on the bus, lost his money and documents. Now he's broke and looking for any job to get back on his feet. And remember, Enrique added, no medical jargon. Speak simply, like a regular guy. And take care of your hands still look too polished, like a doctor's. Antonio looked at his palms. Indeed, they were soft, without calluses. A week before the trip, he had started working in a friend's garage, helping fix cars to roughen his hands. The locally made bus rattled along the broken highway, bouncing over potholes. There weren't many passengers, a couple of elderly people with bags, a young mother with a child, a man in work overalls. Outside the window stretched autumn fields, harvested, with black stripes of plowed soil. Here and there, small villages appeared, crooked houses, abandoned farms, empty silos, a picture of desolation, but strangely familiar, like something from his childhood. Going far? Asked the woman sitting next to him, an elderly lady with a kind face. To Rosarito. Oh, so you're heading to us? I live there too. What brings you? Looking for work. Work? The woman shook her head. It's not easy to find work these days. The factory shut down, people have scattered. Only pensioners and those who have nowhere else to go are left. And what's the village like? Big? Used to be 3,000 people, now less. But it's a good place, folks are friendly. They help each other. Won't leave you in trouble. Rosarito greeted Antonio with gray panel houses from the 1970s and abandoned industrial buildings. The bus station was a rusty shelter with peeling paint and a timetable, half of it crossed out. Where's the ambulance station? Antonio asked a passerby. Over there, the man nodded. Behind the store. See the antenna? That's the place. The one-story brick building looked dreary, peeling plaster, old windows, 2 ambulances in the yard, an old Jeep and a van, both looking very worn. But first, he needed to find a place to stay. On the advice of his bus companion, Antonio headed to Senora Nora Clementa Rosales, who was said to rent rooms. Nora Clementa turned out to be a woman around 70, with sharp eyes and gray hair neatly tied in a bun. Her house was wooden, old but well kept. "There's a room," she said, looking Antonio up and down. "But can you pay?" "I can. I'll find work." "What kind of work?" "What's your trade?" "Any kind. I know my way around with my hands." The old lady smiled. "That's good. Got any documents?" "That's the problem. They were stolen on the way. I'm getting replacements, should arrive soon." Nora Clementa steadied him for a long moment, as if trying to see into his soul. "All right," she finally said. "I'll show you the room, and we'll see." The room was small but clean, a metal bed, a table, a chair, a wardrobe. In the corner, an icon and a small oil lamp. "Will it do?" "Perfectly." "Then settle in. You'll start looking for work tomorrow?" "Tomorrow." Nora Clementa left, and Antonio was alone. From the window, he could see the ambulance station. Somewhere in there worked the people he needed to get to know. Somewhere there, his new life was beginning. In the morning, Antonio approached the station building. The front door was open, voices could be heard inside. He entered a small corridor. The walls were covered with instructional posters, duty schedules, and photos of the staff. "What do you want?" A woman in her late 40s in a medical coat peeked out from a nearby room. "Hello. I'm looking for work. I heard you might need people." The woman gave him a thorough look. "I'm Claudia Esteban, senior dispatcher." "And who are you?" "I came looking for work, but got robbed on the way, lost my documents. Now I'm looking for any job to get back on my feet." "Got any medical training?" "No. But I've got good hands and a working head. I'll do whatever's needed." Claudia Esteban thought for a moment. "And why do you want to work here specifically?" "It's not an easy job, calls day and night, nerves always on edge. And where else would they take me without documents? And besides, I want to help people. I always dreamed of working in medicine, but I never got the education." "Well, I'll be." There was a warmth in the woman's voice. "All right, sit and wait a bit. The crew will be back soon. We'll talk to the felcher." Antonio sat down on a bench in the corridor and waited. The place was Spartan but clean. Someone clearly cared about keeping it in order. On the dispatcher's desk were a radio, a district map, and call logs, everything practical, no unnecessary decorations. Half an hour later, an old Jeep rolled into the yard. Two men got out, one in a medical coat with a worn bag in his hand, the other in blue overalls. "Damian Pedro," Claudia Esteban called to them. "There's a man here looking for work. Says he wants to help." Damian Pedro was a man in his 60s, with gray mustache and sharp, attentive eyes. He was holding a medical bag, exactly like Antonio's grandmother used to carry. "What can you do?" he asked. "All sorts of things. Good with my hands, quick thinker. I can fix things, load and unload, keep things in order." "Education?" "Technical school." Damian Pedro exchanged glances with the driver, a stocky man around 58, with a kind face. "Salvador Ivan, what do you think?" "What's there to think?" the driver replied. "An extra pair of hands wouldn't hurt. Fix the vehicles, carry the stretchers. There's a lot of calls, it's tough alone." "Would you work for food?" Damian Pedro asked. "We can't really pay much, but we can feed you lunch." "I'm fine with that," Antonio nodded. "I just need a start." "Then stay. We'll see how it goes." Thus began a new chapter in Antonio Solano's life. Antonio woke up to the sound of a siren, a long wail cutting through the morning quiet of Rosarito. From the window of Nora Clementa's house, he could see the ambulance station, already buzzing with activity. He dressed quickly and headed over. They had agreed yesterday he would help however he could. In the yard, Salvador Ivan was hunched over the engine of the old Jeep, muttering curses under his breath. Damn thing, acting up again. First it's the fuel pump, now who knows what. What's wrong? Antonio approached. The car's been sputtering for 3 days. And now we've got a call, have to drive to Piedras. The second vehicle's still in the shop in the city. Antonio peered under the hood. An old engine from 1989. The familiar smell, the sound, the arrangement of parts, memories from his childhood. His grandfather had taught him mechanics. Can I take a look at the stretcher? He asked. Sure. But what's wrong with it? In the back of the Jeep lay an old but clean stretcher. Antonio examined the mounts, the bolts were loose, one completely missing. In a sudden stop, the stretcher could come loose and injure the patient. Salvador Ivan, this is bad. The mounts are all loose. It's really dangerous. The driver came over, looked, and whistled. Mother of God. I hadn't even noticed. Good thing you checked. Can we fix it? Got any bolts that fit? You know how to fix it? I can try. In the shed they found bolts, nuts, even an old but working welding machine. Antonio got to work, while Salvador Ivan watched. You sure know your stuff, the driver marveled. And here you said you don't have any medical training. I don't. But my grandpa always said, a man should know how to do everything. Your grandpa was right. In an hour, the stretcher mounts were firmly secured. Antonio even added extra straps for safety. Golden hands on this guy. Salvador Ivan said admiringly. Hey, you ever think about staying with us? Like, permanently? How do you mean? Be our assistant. Our gear's always breaking down. Looks like you're a good handyman. Antonio felt a pang of guilt. These people were accepting him as one of their own, trusting him, wanting him on the team, and he was deceiving them. I'll think about it, he said. In a few days, Antonio realized he had found a special place. The Rosarito ambulance station wasn't just a medical facility. It was a family. Damian Pedro Secamano, the chief feldsher, was a man of remarkable depth. 38 years in medicine had taught him not just to diagnose illnesses but to read human souls. Tall, lean, with gray mustache and keen eyes, he reminded Antonio of the old-school village teachers. You see, Antonio, he said, showing him the district map, every road, every turn here can decide a person's fate. From Piedras to the hospital is 45 kilometers. If the road's bad, you lose half an hour. And half an hour in a heart attack, that's life or death. Damian Pedro worked not for a salary, but for the mission. He could sit all night by a sickbed if he felt the patient needed him. He knew medical manuals by heart, but more importantly, he understood people. Medicine, he loved to say, isn't just pills and injections. It's knowing how to calm, support, give hope. Salvador Ivan Robles was a jack of all trades. A former collective farm mechanic, he knew every road, every pothole and bypass in the district. He could fix any equipment with wire, tape, and a few creative curses. Machines are like women, he philosophized, tinkering with the engine. You have to understand them, feel them. Then they'll serve you faithfully. Behind the wheel, Salvador Ivan was a virtuoso, flying down muddy tracks without jostling the patient, braking so smoothly that even the medical equipment didn't budge. Claudia Esteban Aguila kept the whole station running like clockwork. A dispatcher with 20 years' experience, she knew every family in the district, remembered who suffered from what, who had what problems. Dominguez? Which one, from the center or by the waterfront? Oh, the elder son's wife? Got it, her blood pressure again. A widow and mother of 3, Claudia was both a stern boss and a caring mother to the team. She could scold you for carelessness and then immediately sit you down with tea and empanadas. The junior feldsher, Miguel, a 25-year-old medical college graduate, was full of enthusiasm and romantic ideals about the profession. Sometimes Antonio saw his younger self in him, that young idealist who once dreamed of saving the world. "Antonio, have you thought about studying medicine?" Miguel asked one day. "You've got a knack for it. When you're with patients, it's obvious you understand them." Antonio would wave it off, but inside, those words filled him with warmth. The call came at 6:30 in the morning. Claudia Esteban was jotting down the address and symptoms. Piedras Village, house number 12. 19-year-old girl, severe abdominal pain. Parents panicking. Damien Pedro packed the medical bag. Salvador Ivan warmed up the Jeep. Antonio stood aside, but the felcher called to him. "Come with us. Extra hands won't hurt." The road to Piedras wound through fields and small woods. September had been rainy, the dirt roads were waterlogged, rutted. The old Jeep bounced over the potholes, but Salvador Ivan drove steadily. "How far to Piedras?" Damien Pedro asked. "About 25 kilometers. If the road hasn't washed out, we should get there in about 40 minutes. Symptoms look like appendicitis," the felcher mused. "If so, we'll have to take her to the provincial hospital. That's another 45 kilometers. Antonio listened and thought about how much depended on the correct diagnosis. In the city, the patient would have been at a hospital in 10 minutes. Here, every minute counted. House number 12 in Piedras turned out to be a sturdy adobe building. In the yard, people bustled, a middle-aged man in work clothes, a woman in an apron, 2 teenagers. "The doctor's here," the woman shouted and rushed to the car. "Please, save our Amanda." Inside the house, in the main room, lay a girl about 19 years old. Thin, fair-haired, her face contorted with pain. She clutched her right side and breathed in shallow gasps. "Amanda, sweetheart, the doctor's here," her mother soothed her. Damien Pedro examined the patient professionally and attentively. He palpated her abdomen, listened to her heart, checked her temperature. Antonio stood nearby and saw the classic signs of acute appendicitis. "How long has she been in pain?" the felcher asked. "Since last evening," the father replied. "At first, we thought she'd eaten something bad. But this morning, it got much worse. Temperature is 38.2 degrees Celsius. Abdomen tense in the right iliac region. Positive Shchekina Bloomberg sign," Damien Pedro said and turned to the parents. "We need to get her to the provincial hospital immediately. It's appendicitis. She needs surgery." "Oh God," the mother cried, wringing her hands. "Is it far?" 45 kilometers. And the road's not easy, especially in this weather." Outside, a fine, miserable rain had started, turning the dirt roads into slush. Amanda lay pale but didn't cry, only gritted her teeth against the pain and tried not to moan. "You're going to be fine," Antonio told her. "We'll get you to the hospital soon. The doctors will help." The girl looked at him with grateful eyes. "Thank you." The rain grew heavier. Salvador Ivan turned on the wipers and headlights, visibility worsened. The road to the provincial center passed through 3 villages and crossed 2 bridges, one of which might be flooded. "Can we make it?" Damien Pedro asked. "We'll make it," the driver replied shortly. "Just hold on tight." Amanda lay on the stretcher Antonio had repaired that morning. He was now especially thankful for that work. The mountings held securely, and the girl wasn't jostled. "How are you feeling?" Damien Pedro asked. "It hurts," Amanda whispered. Antonio sat by the stretcher and instinctively did what no one had taught him, but what his heart told him to do. He supported the girl's head to keep her from being shaken. He held her hand when the pain became unbearable. He spoke softly, calmly. "Just hang on a little longer. We're almost there. The doctors are good and experienced. They'll fix everything." "And you? Are you a doctor?" Amanda asked during a brief lull. Antonio hesitated for a second. Damien Pedro cast a sharp glance at him. "No," Antonio answered honestly. "Just helping." You have kind hands, the girl whispered. Like a real doctor's. Salvador Ivan drove like a master. He eased through the turns so smoothly that even the medical equipment didn't budge. On the straights, he pushed the speed to the max, but no jerks. They covered the distance in 40 minutes, a trip that usually took an hour. Here we are, he announced, pulling up to the provincial hospital's emergency entrance. Amanda was immediately taken into surgery. The surgeon confirmed Damien Pedro's diagnosis. Acute appendicitis, but not critical yet if we operate immediately. Before being wheeled away, Amanda whispered to Antonio, "Thank you for your kind hands. You're the real thing." The girl's parents wept with relief. Her father, sturdy farmer Ivan Mateo Islander, shook each member of the team's hand. "Thank you, good people. You saved our daughter." "It's our job," Damien Pedro replied. "Job," the farmer shook his head. "This isn't just a job. It's a calling." The surgery went well. 2 hours later, the surgeon reported that the danger had passed and Amanda was on the mend. On the way back to Rosarito, it was already evening. The rain had stopped, and stars appeared. In the car, it was quiet, everyone was lost in their thoughts. "We did well," Damien Pedro said. "Diagnosed on time, transported quickly." "And Antonio did great too," Salvador Ivan added. "You can tell he understands people. Knows how to handle patients." Antonio stayed silent. Inside, he wrestled with conflicting emotions. Pride that he had been able to help, and guilt for deceiving these people. At Nora Clementa's house, Antonio couldn't sleep. Amanda's face floated before his eyes, young, beautiful, twisted in pain but unbroken. She had been brave, no crying, no complaints, enduring silently. "Thank you for your kind hands," her words echoed in his mind. And he knew, his hands were indeed those of a doctor, though he was hiding it from the very people who trusted him. It wasn't just Amanda's courage that struck him but the professionalism of his colleagues. Damien Pedro had made an accurate diagnosis without modern equipment, relying solely on experience and knowledge. Salvador Ivan drove masterfully, ensuring the patient was unharmed over the rough roads. Claudia Esteban coordinated everything precisely. These were real heroes. They worked for peanuts in tough conditions but did their work with honesty and devotion. And he was deceiving them. "Can't sleep?" Nora Clementa's voice came from the next room. "Not really." "Come on, let's have some tea." In the kitchen, she put the kettle on and brought out some jam. "Still worrying about the girl?" "Yeah. Her name's Amanda." "Such a pretty, brave girl," the old woman said, studying him closely. "Tell me, Antonio, aren't you a doctor?" Antonio flinched. "What makes you think that?" "Oh, just old woman's intuition. You know too much about medicine. And you're good with people, it's obvious." "Nora Clementa." "Don't explain. Everyone has their reasons for hiding the truth. But remember, the truth always comes out eventually. It's better if you're the one to tell it." The next few days, Antonio struggled with doubt. His colleagues trusted him more and more, and he felt like a traitor. He remembered his grandmother's words, "Trust between doctor and patient must be built on truth. Without truth, you can't heal." She had said it many years ago, but the words were etched in his memory. Just a few more days, Antonio decided. "I'll work for a week, then tell them everything. Let them decide if they want someone like me as their chief doctor." A call came at dawn, a heart attack in a remote farmstead. The patient was a 52-year-old farmer. His wife was panicked, her husband was gasping for air, clutching his chest. They drove fast, but it still took half an hour to reach the farmstead. The road was even worse than to Piedras. They found the patient in critical condition, a textbook myocardial infarction. Damien Pedro worked quickly, oxygen, nitroglycerin, pain relief. But it was clear, this was a tough case, resuscitation might be needed. "Antonio, pass me the aspirin," the feldsher asked. "It's in that bag." Antonio mechanically fulfilled the request but added, Damian Pedro, should we give morphine? The pain is strong, it could trigger a spasm. The felcher looked at him in surprise. Where did you learn that? Read it somewhere. You read a lot, Damian Pedro said thoughtfully. And all about medicine. They got the patient to the hospital. The doctors confirmed the heart attack, but the timely care saved his life. On the way back, the colleagues were quiet. Unspoken questions hung in the air. Their new helper knew too much for a man without medical education. Antonio lay on his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the September wind rustled, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. One thought beat in his mind, tomorrow I'll tell them everything, I can't keep lying. He got up, pulled an old button phone from his bag, and dialed Enrique's number. Hello, his friend's voice was sleepy. What's wrong? It's the middle of the night. Enrique, I can't do this anymore. Tomorrow I'll tell them everything. Wait. Tell them what? Who I really am. They're good people, honest, and I'm deceiving them. After what happened with the girl. She said, thank you for your kind hands. You understand? And I'm a doctor, and I'm hiding it. There was a pause on the other end. Antonio, are you sure? Maybe wait a bit longer. No. Damian Pedro already suspects. Today he practically asked me if it wasn't time to come clean. And me? I can't look people in the eye anymore, people who trust me. If you've decided, tell them. But do it carefully. Explain your reasons, let them understand you didn't do it out of malice. I know. And remember, you're a good doctor, Antonio. A good man. They can see that, even without knowing the truth. That means they'll accept you. After the call, he couldn't sleep. Antonio tossed and turned all night, mentally rehearsing the words he would say to his colleagues. How to explain that he didn't want to deceive them, but to understand them, to see them as they really were, without official masks. Toward dawn, he got up, pulled out the only thing truly dear to him, a photograph of his grandmother Patricia. An old photo in a worn frame, a woman in a white coat standing in front of a rural clinic, holding that same worn bag. Grandma, he whispered, help me find the right words. You always said, truth is the foundation of trust. Now it's time to tell the truth. The room was half lit by the first gray light of dawn. Antonio knelt before the photo, as he had done in childhood when asking his grandmother for advice. Give me the strength not to fear their reaction. And let them understand, I meant no harm. Outside, it was beginning to get light. Something shifted inside him, the anxiety disappeared, replaced by firm resolve. Today he would say everything. Whatever happens, happens. These thoughts kept him awake all night. But in the morning, when the whole staff of the ambulance station had gathered, Damian Pedro, Claudia Esteban, Salvador Ivan, and Miguel the junior felcher, Antonio knew the moment of truth had come. He was the last to arrive, trembling inside with nerves. Well, comrades, Damian Pedro began, let's review yesterday's call, the heart attack in Rojo Farmstead. Damian Pedro, Antonio interrupted. Can I say something first? There's something important I need to tell you. Everyone turned toward him. Their eyes were full of surprise and curiosity. Speak, the felcher nodded. Antonio stood up and looked around at the faces of his colleagues. These people had become like family to him in a week. And now he risked losing their trust forever. I deceived you, he began, his voice trembling. My name isn't just Antonio. It's Antonio Luis Solano. And I'm a doctor. A general practitioner with honors. A heavy silence fell. Claudia Esteban slowly set down her pen. Salvador Ivan scratched his head. Miguel's mouth fell open in shock. I didn't come here by accident, Antonio continued. I was sent from the province to take the position of chief doctor at this station. But I wanted to first work alongside you as a regular employee. To understand who you really are. To see you from the inside, without formal barriers. Well, I'll be. Miguel muttered under his breath. My documents weren't stolen on the bus. I deliberately didn't show them. Bought old clothes, played a role. Because I heard how differently people behave with bosses compared to equals. And I needed to see the real you. Damian Pedro slowly took off his glasses and wiped them with a handkerchief. So what are we to you, lab rats? Claudia Esteban's voice rang with hurt. Were we putting on a show for you? And you just sat there watching us like animals in a zoo? No, Antonio stepped forward. No, you don't understand. I wasn't studying you like test subjects. I wanted to understand if I could be a part of your team. If I was worthy to be your leader. In 38 years, I've never seen a trick like this. Damian Pedro shook his head. A chief doctor incognito. Salvador Ivan said thoughtfully. I was wondering where the guy got such skills. Good hands, knows his way around the equipment too. Forgive me, Antonio said. I know I acted wrongly. But believe me, I didn't mean to offend anyone. I just wanted to make sure I could work with honest people. Claudia Esteban got up and paced the room. Different emotions flickered in her eyes, hurt, confusion, something else. And what do you think of us now? She asked sharply. Did we meet your standards? Did we pass your inspection? Claudia Esteban, you don't understand. Antonio turned to her. I admire you. All of you. Over this week, I realized I'm among true professionals. People who work not for fear, but for conscience. Nice words, Damian Pedro remarked. But what about actions? In actions, Antonio continued, I saw how Damian Pedro diagnoses accurately without modern equipment. How Salvador Ivan drives so patients aren't jostled. How Claudia Esteban remembers every family in the district. How Miguel is burning with the desire to help people. Miguel smiled unexpectedly. Well, at least now we know our new chief doctor understands us. He's seen how we really work. Exactly. Antonio said. I saw you without the formalities, without the masks. Saw how you truly feel about your work and your patients. And I understood, with people like you, we can move mountains. Damian Pedro was silent for a long time, then slowly nodded. The motive is strange, but noble, I suppose. We've had plenty of chief doctors come here who started barking orders on day one. You wanted to understand first. Remember Cruz? Salvador Ivan chimed in. On his first day, he declared he'd whip everyone into shape and end the sloppiness. Didn't even last a month. Orsaminos, added Claudia Esteban. Always whining, the pay's too low, conditions are bad, patients are ungrateful. But this one actually worked with us, Damian Pedro said thoughtfully. Got his hands dirty, rode with patience. Means he's not squeamish. Claudia Esteban left and returned with a tray, a teapot, glasses, and a plate of empanadas. Well, seeing as how things turned out, she said, let's have some tea. And talk heart to heart. They sat around the table in the break room. The atmosphere slowly thawed. Antonio talked about his childhood in the village, about his grandmother the feldsher, about why he chose medicine. Why did you ask to come here specifically? Miguel asked. I was tired of the city hospital. There, it's all wrong. Careers, connections, politics. I just wanted to treat people. Politics? Claudia Esteban asked with interest. Antonio told them about Ines, about Crusp, about how disillusioned he became with city medicine. They listened silently, nodding in sympathy. I see, Damian Pedro said. So you fled here from the dirty hands. Smart move. And what now? Asked Salvador Ivan. Are you going to be our chief doctor or what? If you'll have me, Antonio stood, I swear I'll do everything to improve the station. We'll find new equipment, raise salaries, improve working conditions. Swearing's fine, Damian Pedro smirked. But we've heard all kinds of promises before. I'm not promising, Antonio said. I swear, on my grandmother's memory. Damian Pedro got up, walked to the table, and took a bundle of keys from the drawer. Well then, if that's how it is, here are the keys to the chief doctor's office. Maybe with you, this station will finally thrive. Antonio accepted the keys, the metal still warm from the previous owner's hands, holding the memory of those who had tried to make a change. Thank you for your trust. I won't let you down. The chief doctor's office was in the same building, but Antonio hadn't been there once in the past week. The room was small and Spartan, a desk, 2 chairs, a cabinet of documents, and an old safe. On the desk were folders of reports. Antonio opened the first and recoiled, 3 months' salary debt. The fleet's technical condition was critical. Medical equipment worn down by 90%. He made a list of the essentials: new stretchers, a defibrillator, oxygen tanks, essential medications. The total was astronomical for a small station. He began calling local businesses. Most turned him down immediately. Doctor, we've got our own problems. Crisis, you know. No money for charity. Try the province, asked the officials. A trip to the provincial center yielded nothing either. The officials shrugged, spoke of budget shortfalls, promised to review the matter. In the evening, Antonio returned to Rosarito disappointed. The team was waiting for him at the station. Well, asked Damian Pedro. No luck. Everyone said no. We didn't expect much anyway, Salvador Ivan said philosophically. We've worked without help before, we'll keep going. What matters is, you're honest. No, Antonio shook his head. We can't keep going like this. We have to find a way. That evening, over tea at Nora Clementa's, Antonio told her about the failures. Don't get upset, the old woman comforted. Patience and hard work will grind everything down. Is there anyone around here who could really help? Antonio asked. Nora Clementa thought for a moment. There's one man. Ramirez Ivan Mateo. He owns a sawmill, good business. But he's special. Special how? 2 years ago, he had a heart attack. Our boys saved him, Damian Pedro and Salvador. Barely pulled him through. Since then, he says he owes the medics. But you need the right approach. What kind of approach? Honesty. He can smell a lie a mile away. If you ask for help, tell him straight what the money's for. And later, give a full report on every cent. And how can I meet him? I can arrange it. Our daughters went to school together. He's a good man, but very principled. For the first time that day, Antonio felt hope. Maybe all wasn't lost. Maybe someone would help the station get back on its feet. Nora Clementa, please arrange it. We really need it. I will. Just be ready, he'll ask tough questions. And don't make empty promises. Ivan Mateo doesn't waste words. That night, Antonio slept soundly for the first time in many days. The truth had freed him from the burden of deceit, and ahead lay the hope of real change. In the morning, a new life began, no more masks, now as the true chief doctor of Rosarito's ambulance station. A hard, but honest life. Ivan Mateo Ramirez met Antonio in his office, a spacious room with a massive oak desk in the center of freshly cut wood. A man in his 50s, broad-shouldered, with piercing eyes and graying temples. On the desk were family photos, awards, and next to the computer, a small icon of St. Pantaleon. So you're the new chief doctor at our station? Ramirez's voice was calm but firm. Nora Clementa spoke highly of you. I'm trying to live up to that trust, Antonio replied. I remember you, the businessman said unexpectedly. You saved my life. Back then you were just working as an assistant, but turns out you were a doctor. Antonio raised his eyebrows in surprise. You remember? But you were unconscious. Not the whole time. I remember how you held my hand on the way to the hospital. Hang in there, Uncle Ivan, everything will be all right. Calm, confident voice. I thought then, could a mere assistant be like that? Now I understand. Ramirez stood up and walked to the window, through which stacks of logs and factory buildings were visible. You know, Dr. Antonio, I'm a cautious man, Ramirez said slowly. It's easy to spend money, much harder to earn it. Harder still to give it away properly. He stood there, gazing out over the factory yard. 2 years ago, after the heart attack, I thought a lot about what matters in life and what is just fluff. I realized money is a tool. You can use it for harm or for good. Don Ivan, I didn't come for gratitude. I know, for help. And that's the right thing. The ambulance station needs equipment. But before I agree, I need to know, are you ready for real responsibility? Ramirez returned to his desk and opened a planner. How much do you need? And for what exactly? Antonio pulled out the budget plan he had prepared. The businessman studied the figures carefully, occasionally asking for details. Defibrillator, oxygen machines, vehicle repairs. A serious sum. And what guarantees do I have that the money will be used properly? Full accountability, Antonio said firmly. Every peso will be documented. Receipts, invoices, work reports, I'll provide everything. And if inspectors come? Say it's illegal aid, accuse us of corruption? It will be properly registered as charitable assistance. Contracts, paperwork, everything by the law. Ramirez was silent for a long time, drumming his fingers on the table. Finally, he nodded. All right. But with one condition, I want to see where the money goes. I'll come and check personally. And if even a single peso goes astray. It won't, Antonio promised. Then get started. I'll transfer the money tomorrow. The Rosarito ambulance station began to transform before their eyes. Antonio personally oversaw every purchase and every repair. They first bought the essentials, a modern defibrillator, oxygen machines, new stretchers. My God, Claudia Esteban exclaimed, looking over the new equipment. We've dreamed of this for 20 years. Damian Pedro carefully picked up the defibrillator, reading the instructions. Automatic. It identifies the rhythm itself, adjusts the charge. Amazing. Now we'll have to learn how to use it, Antonio said. I'll arrange training courses. The old Jeep was sent for repairs. Salvador Ivan personally oversaw the work. The engine was completely overhauled, the body repainted, the interior refurbished. Good as new, the driver beamed. It'll last another 10 years easy. The staff was gradually trained to use the new equipment. Antonio himself held the sessions, explaining the principles of operation and usage details. They picked it up quickly, they had the experience, they just lacked modern tools. For the first time in 10 years, something's actually changing for the better, Miguel said. They always promised, but nothing ever happened. The first major case using the new equipment came at the end of November, a call to Abadal's village for a 70-year-old woman having a stroke. In the past, such patients often didn't survive the trip to the hospital. Now, with oxygen and modern meds, they managed to stabilize her condition. We saved her, Damian Pedro rejoiced. A week ago, she wouldn't have had a chance. Trouble came unexpectedly. A complaint was filed anonymously with the provincial health department. Rosarito's station was allegedly receiving illegal financial aid, potential corruption. Valentina Eduardo called Antonio, sounding worried. Dr. Antonio, a commission is coming to you. They'll check everything, documents, equipment, finances. Be prepared. What's there to check? Everything's by the book. I know it's honest. But you know how it goes, they'll find something to nitpick. Be careful. The commission arrived the next day, 3 officials in sharp suits carrying thick folders. The leader was Alejandro Victorio Moreno, deputy director of the department. Solano, explain where you got the new equipment, he began bluntly. What funds were used? Antonio provided all the documents, the contract with Ramirez, receipts, invoices. The officials studied the papers critically, looking for any violations. Charitable assistance, Moreno said, drawing out the words. And are you sure there were no side deals with this Ramirez? Promises of special treatment? No special treatment. The man simply said thank you for saving his life. We'll see. The commission interviewed every staff member at the station, questioned local residents, and examined medical records. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone was afraid they would lose the new equipment. Dr. Antonio, Claudia Esteban approached him. What if they take everything away from us? They won't, Antonio said. We didn't do anything wrong. But fear had taken hold inside him too. So much effort, so much hope, and it could all collapse because of someone's anonymous complaint. When the commission interviewed the staff, something amazing happened. The colleagues all stood united in Antonio's defense. In 38 years of work, I've never seen a more honest leader, Damian Pedro said firmly. He spends every penny on the people. He could have raised his own salary, but he didn't, Claudia Esteban added. He puts everything into equipment. Salvador Ivan commented philosophically. What's there to check? People are dying less, there's your inspection. The local residents didn't stand aside either. Ana Pedra, recently saved from a stroke, came in her hospital gown straight from her ward. What kind of people are these? The doctor saves lives, and they come with complaints? Ivan Mateo Ramirez came personally, bringing all the documents confirming the donations were voluntary. I spend my money how I want and help who I choose. And this doctor is an honest man. He reports every penny. The inspection lasted a week. The commission nitpicked every little detail but couldn't find any major violations. Everything was legal, all documents were in order. Valentina Eduardo called Antonio with good news. Dr. Antonio, congratulations. The inspection is over, no complaints. Moreover, you've been included in the pilot program for rural healthcare modernization. What does that mean? Additional funding from the federal budget. Your station has become a model facility. Other directors will come to learn from you. I can't believe it. Believe it. They finally found the right person for the job. Keep up the good work. The news about being included in the federal program was the best New Year's gift. Now they could plan serious improvements, not just equipment, but building renovations and salary increases too. With the arrival of spring, full modernization of the station began. Equipment in all the ambulances was replaced step by step. The old van was decommissioned, and a new, specially equipped patient transport vehicle was purchased. The station building was fully renovated, new windows, doors, heating. The break room got modern furniture and computers for electronic medical records. You wouldn't recognize the place. Nora Clementa said when she visited. It's like a provincial hospital now. Salaries were raised by 30%. Not a fortune by city standards, but a substantial increase for the countryside. Dr. Antonio, said Claudia Esteban, you made us feel human again. Before, we were working just for the idea, but we couldn't even feed our families. The most important acquisition was a fully equipped mobile ICU unit, an ambulance capable of conducting resuscitation procedures on the road. Now they could save heart attack and stroke patients during transport. By the end of 2016, the statistics spoke for themselves. Response times were reduced by 15 minutes thanks to the new vehicles and improved roads. Survival rates for heart attacks and strokes doubled. Letters of gratitude poured into the station from patients and their families. Antonio read each one aloud during staff meetings. It became a cherished tradition. Thank you for saving my husband's life. The hospital doctors said if he'd arrived half an hour later, it would have been too late, wrote Senora Maria Vasquez from Piedras Village. My grandson was born in the ambulance, but thanks to the new equipment, everything went well. Thank you for your professionalism, thanked Dona Ana Esteban, a grandmother of many. Overall mortality in the region dropped by 12%. The provincial newspaper wrote about it, and it was mentioned at ministry meetings. Behind every number stood a real human life. Farmer Pedres, who had been saved from a massive heart attack, was back working his fields, enjoying life. Young mother Adriana safely gave birth in the ambulance. The new equipment made emergency deliveries possible. One incident especially stood out: a car accident on the highway. 2 vehicles collided, 5 people injured. Before, such a situation would have been a disaster. Now, with 2 fully equipped ambulances, they managed quickly. Everyone was taken to the hospital alive. Every life we save is someone's husband, father, son, Antonio told his colleagues. We're not just doing a job, we're changing destinies. The success of the Rosarito ambulance station didn't go unnoticed. In July, a provincial TV crew arrived and filmed a segment about the transformation of rural healthcare. In August, the station was visited by the governor himself. Antonio showed the new equipment and spoke about the development plans. The governor was pleased. This is a model of how rural healthcare should work. We'll be spreading your practices throughout the province. A letter of gratitude came from the Ministry of Health. Antonio was awarded a certificate of honor for outstanding contributions to rural healthcare development. I didn't expect this, he admitted to Enrique over the phone. A year ago, I thought my career was over, and now, this kind of recognition. You earned it, his friend replied. You did what others only promised. Delegations from other districts began to visit the station to learn from their experience. Antonio gladly shared his knowledge, showing how everything was organized. The key, he told his colleagues, isn't just the equipment itself. The key is the people working with heart and soul. Without that, the best equipment is just cold metal. The Rosarito ambulance station became a symbol of rural healthcare's revival, and Antonio Solano was living proof that one person could change an entire system if they had the will, knowledge, and the support of honest people. But the most important moment was yet to come, a meeting that would change not just his professional life, but his personal life as well. It was a clear autumn day, the air sharp and transparent, with every detail of the world seeming honed to perfection. In the station yard, a provincial TV crew was bustling, the cameraman adjusting his lens, the sound technician checking microphones. Antonio watched the commotion from the doorway, feeling slightly nervous. Over his time leading the station, he had gotten used to delegations, but the media always made him uneasy. Journalists loved to embellish reality. Dr. Antonio, we're ready to start, a young woman in a formal suit addressed him. Amanda Islander, correspondent from the district radio. We're doing a story on the transformation of rural healthcare. Amanda Islander, the name echoed faintly in his memory, but Antonio couldn't place it. A slender, fair-haired young woman with intelligent gray eyes and a determined chin. She spoke clearly and professionally, but there was a special warmth in her voice. Of course, Antonio nodded. Where shall we start? First, some wide shots of the station, then interviews with the team. We want to show the people who made this miracle happen. The filming began with a tour of the renovated building. Amanda asked smart, detailed questions, but Antonio noticed that she kept giving him thoughtful glances, as if trying to recall something. Now tell us about the day everything changed, the journalist requested when they stopped by the new ambulance. It all started with a routine call, Antonio began. A young woman with acute appendicitis in the village of Piedras. Amanda flinched and lowered the microphone. Piedras Village, she repeated, her voice trembling. In September? Yes, exactly. Why? Her voice shook. I was the patient that day. With acute appendicitis. In Piedras. The world seemed to freeze. Antonio stared at the journalist, and suddenly he saw the familiar face, the 19-year-old girl, pale with pain, who had whispered to him, "Thank you for your kind hands." Amanda, he whispered. It was you. And you. Tears glistened in her eyes, her voice trembling with emotion. You held my hand and told me everything would be all right. All the way to the hospital. Your voice became my anchor through the pain. The crew froze, realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Antonio and Amanda looked at each other, and a profound tension filled the air, the past meeting the present, the circle of fate closing. "It can't be," Amanda whispered and suddenly burst into tears. You saved my life. And now you're the chief doctor here, and you're a journalist," Antonio smiled. "A beautiful, smart journalist." After the emotional meeting, they had to gather themselves and continue working. But now, the interview had a special tone. Amanda wasn't just talking to medics, she was speaking to the people she owed her life to. "Damien Pedro," she turned to the chief Felcher, "tell us how the station's work has changed in recent years." "Well, what's there to tell?" the old medic smiled. "New equipment, better conditions, and most importantly, we got a leader who really cares about people." Dr. Antonio didn't come here for a career, he came for the work. Amanda nodded, taking notes, but Antonio could see it was hard for her to hold back her emotions. Whenever the camera turned away, she looked at him with such gratitude and warmth that his own heart beat faster. "Salvador Ivan, show us the new fleet," the journalist requested. "Of course." The driver proudly opened the doors of the new mobile ICU ambulance. "Now this is real equipment," Salvador Ivan said proudly. "Not like before, running on a prayer and duct tape." "Do you remember that trip?" Amanda asked suddenly. "When you were taking me?" "How could I forget?" Salvador Ivan laughed. "It was pouring rain, the road was a mess. And this guy," he nodded toward Antonio, "took care of you the whole way. We thought he was just a good orderly. Turns out he was a doctor." Claudia Esteban showed off the new communication equipment and explained the modern dispatch system. But when it came to how the atmosphere in the team had changed, she said the most important thing. "Dr. Antonio showed us that medicine isn't just a job, it's a calling. And when the leader himself is willing to sit by a patient's bedside all night, we start working differently too. And now look at our most famous patient all grown up," Damien Pedro winked. "I remember you, such a skinny little girl. Now a real journalist." When the filming wrapped up, the crew gathered in the break room. Amanda went around, shaking hands and thanking everyone, but she spoke to Antonio separately. "You know," she said quietly, "I still remember every minute of that trip. The pain was unbearable, I wanted to scream. And you weren't just holding my head so I wouldn't bounce around. You were holding my soul. I was just doing what my heart told me to do." "That's why you're a true doctor," Amanda said, looking him in the eyes. "After that day, I decided I wanted to tell the stories of people like you. Real heroes who don't work for fame." "And how's it going?" "I enrolled in journalism, graduated with honors. Now I work for the district radio. I dream of making a documentary series about rural healthcare." Antonio listened, impressed. The frightened girl had turned into a strong, determined woman. And something in her eyes, in her voice, and the way she looked at him, made his heart beat faster. "Amanda, are you married?" "No," she smiled. "It was all studies, then work. No time for a personal life." "I understand. Same for me. Work takes over everything." "And you? Are you married?" "I was engaged." "Didn't work out," Antonio said, not wanting to dive into the whole story with Ines. Amanda stayed in Rosarito another day to shoot more footage and interview local residents. Antonio volunteered to be her guide. "Are there many sights to see around here?" she asked as they walked down the village's main street. "Depends on how you look at it. There's the old church from the 18th century, they're restoring it now. And over there's the park. It's a bit neglected these days, but in the fall it's beautiful." They walked along the park's autumn alleys, and Antonio talked about village life, about development plans, about how slowly but surely the infrastructure was being revived. Amanda listened intently, asking smart questions. "It's strange," she said, sitting down on a bench by the pond. "This is only my second time here, but I feel like I'm home." "Where's home for you?" Antonio asked, sitting beside her. "Piedras. My parents run a farm there." After university, I thought I'd stay in the city, but then I realized I want to work here. Tell the stories of my own people. That must have been tough, going from the farm to journalism. It was. But my dad supported me. He said, "Amanda, you're a smart girl. Your job is to show people the truth." They talked until evening about work, dreams, and how hard it is to find your place in life. Antonio told her about his grandmother, about family traditions. Amanda shared her plans to make a documentary about rural doctors. When it was time to say goodbye, they exchanged phone numbers. "Will I see you in the provincial center?" Antonio asked. "Definitely," Amanda smiled. "I still have some questions for the interview." They both knew the questions weren't the real reason. They called each other every day. At first, it was about work, Amanda clarifying facts for her article, Antonio talking about the station's operations. But soon, the conversations became more personal. Amanda came to Rosarito every weekend, supposedly for work. She filmed local life, interviewed the elders, but she spent most of her time at the ambulance station. "She likes you," Damian Pedro said, watching Antonio see Amanda off again. "Is it that obvious?" "Very. And she doesn't look at you like you're just a subject for her story." Amanda quickly became part of the team. She helped Claudia Esteban with paperwork, listened to Salvador Ivan's stories about the old days, and even learned the basics of medicine from Damian Pedro. "You might as well become a medic yourself," the felcher joked. "You've got golden hands and a good head." "No," Amanda laughed. "My job is to tell the world about your heroic work." They spent New Year's together in Rosarito. Amanda met Nora Clementa, who immediately took a liking to her. "She's a good girl," the old woman told Antonio in private. "You can tell she's got a good heart. And she looks at you the right way, not like you're a wallet, but like you're a person." "Nora Clementa, we're just friends." "Yeah, right, friends," she chuckled. "Friends' eyes don't shine like that." Antonio finally understood it wasn't just gratitude for saving her life. It was something real. And when Amanda, after New Year's night, said, "I fell in love not just with you, but with your mission," he knew he had found the person he was ready to share his life with. They celebrated Medical Workers' Day with a formal ceremony. Guests from the province came to the station, awards were presented, and speeches were made. Antonio received a provincial certificate for outstanding contributions to healthcare development. After the official part, once the guests had left, he asked Amanda to walk with him to the ambulance, the very one that had taken her to the hospital years ago. "Amanda," he began, taking a small box from his pocket, "this ring belonged to my grandmother. It's simple, not expensive, but it has a history." Amanda froze, looking at the antique ring with its small stone. "You didn't just save my faith in people," Antonio continued, "you saved my heart. Will you share this road with me?" Amanda burst into tears, from happiness, from overwhelming emotions, from the realization of how wonderfully life works. "Yes, Antonio," she whispered through tears. "I want to share this road with you." That evening they sat in the chief doctor's office. On the table lay his grandmother's old medical bag, now a family heirloom. They planned their wedding and discussed the future. "I want to work here," Amanda said. "To tell the world about people like you and your colleagues." "And the career in the provincial center?" "The most important career is being needed. And I'm needed here." The phone rang. Claudia Esteban reported an emergency call in Piedras. "That's my hometown," Amanda exclaimed. "Let's go together." Antonio grabbed his grandmother's bag and headed to the door. "Now we're a team, Claudia Esteban." The wedding was held in Rosarito, and half the district came to celebrate. Damian Pedro, like a godfather, led the bride to the altar. They were blessed right beside the same ambulance where the proposal had happened. Amanda created a documentary film titled Roads of Mercy, which was broadcast on provincial television. A year later, their son Timoteo was born, named after great-grandfather Timoteo, the father of grandmother Patricia. The ambulance station became a family endeavor. Antonio treated patients, Amanda told the stories of village life and the daily work of medics. In the mornings, she would see her husband off to work, and in the evenings, they would sit together in the office, making plans for the future. "What do you think?" Amanda asked one day, rocking Timoteo in her arms. "Will he become a doctor too?" "We'll see," Antonio smiled. "The most important thing is that he grows up to be a good person." Outside, the sun was rising over Rosarito. A new day was beginning. And somewhere, a phone was already ringing, a new call, a new life to save. The circle had closed. The road to the heart led home. Friends, what do you think about Antonio's decision? Was he right to hide his profession to truly get to know people? Share your thoughts in the comments. Wishing you good health and a wonderful mood.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.